Grace and peace to you and welcome, welcome. How many of you are sitting in the exact same spot you usually sit in this room when you're in worship? How many of you wanted to sit in the spot where you normally sit in worship, but somebody else was already there? How many of you are sitting in this room among the first times ever, and it's kind of weird? Well, great. Welcome. I'm Reverend Joe Kalis. I'm the pastor here at Peakland United Methodist Church. I am so grateful to have this opportunity to talk and answer questions about the state of our denomination. This is an information session only. We don't have to vote on anything. We get to, hallelujah, we get to ask and answer questions. Some of you pre-submitted your questions ahead of time. Well done, you. And so we've got some responses that we'll share with you, and then that have to do with this affiliation and the work of the denomination. And then we'll open up the floor for other questions that you all might have. And then we have some additional questions that don't really have to do with this affiliation or anything, about communion and scouts and does the pastor need a doctorate? So, lots of things to talk about, a variety of subjects. I lit the candles. When we light candles, what we're doing is acknowledging the presence of Christ. We do that always in worship, but when Methodists gather together, I am grateful that the Spirit of Christ is with us. We'll remember the Spirit of Christ in our conversation and our words to one another. This Lenten season, we have been using a Quaker tradition of praying with our hands, open to receive from God, turned over to turn over things we need to God. So let's begin with that. Turn your palms over. We give to you, God, all the burdens that we are carrying. We lay before you our hurt, our anxiety, our pride, our ego. We give them to you so that you might transform them. We turn our palms up so that we might receive from you good news, hope, vision, unity with Christ, and unity with each other. Amen. I've asked Andrew to start us off with a brief history of how we got to where we are in our denomination with regarding LGBTQIA folks. Andrew?
So in 17...
Yeah.
When the United Methodist Church came together in 1968, there was no language in our rules, in our book of discipline that had anything to do with human sexuality. That lasted for a total of 4 years. At the next General Conference in 1972, what is called the incompatibility language was put into the book of discipline. This language has been up for discussion at pretty much every general conference since then. So every time we've gotten together to discuss what's going on with the book of discipline and how we are going to embody Christ's love and Christ's kingdom for the next 4 years, there's been discussions about this. This came ahead in 2016 when the General Conference requested that a commission on the way forward would be put together so that we could assess how best to move forward with what seemed to be a widening divide within the denomination. In 2019, there was a special General Conference called. Its primary role was to go over and discuss the different proposals that the commission on the way forward had come up with. And at the end of a week, the General Conference decided to adopt what has been called the traditional plan, which both affirmed the incompatibility language and strengthened a lot of the follow-through. So how people would be reprimanded for being a practicing LGBTQIA person or performing a wedding. After 2019's General Conference, there was a lot of divide among the churches across the world. And there began to be talks about different portions of the United Methodist Church breaking off to form their own denominations. Last year, we had conversations because the Global Methodist Church, which is grown out of one of the traditional gatherings within the United Methodist Church, decided that they were going to launch their new denomination without a general conference coming together to do a clean split, is probably the best way to say that. So over the last year, there's been a lot in the news about the Global Methodist Church and how it has been interacting with the United Methodist Church in different pockets. And because this new church has launched, there are now churches and clergy who are choosing to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church to go and join them or to go and become independent. And that's pretty much where we are.
Well done.
Denise, what is the process other Methodist churches must go through for disaffiliation in the Virginia conference?
All right, so another thing.
This is Denise Bates. She's our district superintendent.
Hello.
She delivered me unto you.
I was going to say, I'm not quite that old. I'm pretty old, but not quite that old. So another thing that happened at that special called General Conference in 2019, besides the keeping of the incompatible language, the prohibitive language, and strengthening the penalties for violating those passages in the discipline, was a proposal that came from the traditionalists for a new paragraph to the discipline called 2553. And 2553, as it was approved for the discipline at that special called General Conference, said that if you disagree with the discipline on this matter of human sexuality for matters of conscience, here's a way you can disaffiliate from the denomination. And it laid out a method for that. And everything under that paragraph has to be completed by 12/31/23. That's how it was proposed and approved in 2019. And that stayed there. And really, in the Virginia conference, when I became a DS, I did the first disaffiliation under a different paragraph because it was a conservative church. And in fact, as far as to my knowledge, to this point, it has been all conservative churches who have chosen to leave, okay? Let me be really clear about that. Nobody's got to do nothing. I know that's not good English, but no one has to do anything. You do not have to vote. Just keep on doing what you're doing. But if you choose, if a local church chooses to enter this process that we've put together for 2553 in the Virginia Annual Conference, you can choose to do that. So 2553 in the Virginia Annual Conference, let me say another thing too. There's a lot of information out there, which is probably one reason why we're having this little chat this afternoon. And not all of it is good and accurate, I'll just say. And I will also say you may see or hear things that are going on in other annual conferences in Florida or Western North Carolina or Texas or wherever. I am here to tell you that doesn't matter a whit to you, because the only thing that matters for Virginia Annual Conference churches is the Virginia Annual Conference 2553 process, okay? We chose early on to stick to 2553 and keep it as simple as possible, as grounded in prayer and the local discernment of the local church as possible, and to be able to offer that to churches who sought to leave the denomination over matters of human sexuality. It doesn't matter, the Judicial Council had a ruling. Remember how I said it was first put in there, you had to disagree with the discipline. Judicial Council had a ruling that said, handed down a ruling that said, it doesn't matter if you agree with the discipline or disagree with the discipline over matters of conscience related to human sexuality, 2553 is available to you. So we put together this process, the spring of 2022, it became available. And it's the same process for every church. Doesn't matter whether you're in the middle of a big city or I've done some that are in the middle of a cattle pasture. It doesn't matter if you're a huge church or a little tiny church or anywhere in between. It's the same process. It doesn't matter whether you want to, your church after it disaffiliates wants to join the Global Methodist Church or the Presbyterians or Baptist or be independent. It's the same process and the same cost structure applies. So I'm just going to give you a thumbnail of the process. So this is not your congregational disaffiliation meeting, okay? That's an hour just on this topic. But in brief, the process would go there. The DS would come to a local church at their invitation, at the leadership of that church's invitation to do what we call a congregational information meeting. And that's where we share the background. Did you read my presentation? We all say the same thing. We have a script so we can be consistent across all the districts. It's really important. So we have that information meeting. We speak a little to the history, explain 2553 and the cost structure and the process itself. And so we do all that. After that meeting, if a congregation chooses, they can enter a time, and that's just information. Just because you have one doesn't mean you're going to do it or want to do it. You just want the information. I have churches that have that meeting and I never hear from them again. Or others that have the meeting and say, let's go, so it's everywhere in between. After the information meeting, if a congregation chooses, they enter a time to proceed. They enter a minimum of 30 days of intentional prayerful discernment. This is all based on the local church's discernment, okay? And so it's not kumbaya, we're going to pray about it. It's a little more than that, but the local church crafts the plan for it with the help of the pastors. And some plans are very elaborate with a sermon series, Sunday school lessons, scripture, praying at the same time every day or whatever. And others are as simple as, well, we have a hot dog dinner on Wednesday night, and after we eat our hot dog, we're going to go to the sanctuary and sing a hymn, read some scripture, pray a prayer, and talk. And we're going to do that for the 30 days. And that's fine. So at the end of that 30 days, they take what we call a straw poll, an informal vote, to see which way the winds of disaffiliation are blowing. And any answer is the answer for that congregation, right? So I've had some that say, stop, we want to stay UMC. We appreciate the information, appreciated being able to pray and talk about it amongst ourselves and with the Lord, because that's what it's about, being in alignment with what the Lord is calling that local church to do. But we want to stop. I have other churches that say, well, we want to discern some more. And so I've had one that did it for 90 days. And sometimes churches will say, we're going to stop and wait and see what happens at General Conference in 2024. And other churches that say full steam ahead, but whatever the discernment of that local church is how we proceed. A local church can stop the process anywhere along the line that they want. If they stop it before the next step, they haven't spent any money. And the next step is where I connect their local church attorney and the conference trustee's attorney to finalize the disaffiliation agreement. The numbers aren't negotiable, and the agreement's a template. So it's really finalizing it. Let me tell you a little bit about the cost structure. We never take the number with us when we go to a meeting. Here's my joke, because if I brought a number to a meeting, that's all they'd be thinking about instead of listening. So, and usually people acknowledge and they do their head. So the cost structure is the same for every church, but it's particular to each church because it uses the decimal, okay? Your decimal is a little number. I don't know what Peakland's decimal is, and I'm just making this number up, but it's a number like 0.000678892. The decimal is based on numbers taken from the statistical tables, the favorite activity of pastors for the month of January. One of the tables is about membership, the second one's about expenses, the third's about giving, and in that expense one, there's numbers related to operating expenses and salaries. It's put into a formula and that pops out with your decimal. So if you're a medium-sized church, it might be 0.000678892. If you're a little bitty church, it might be 0.000067892. And if you're a great big church with a lot of staff, many pastors, it might be 0.00067892. That's the little number that is multiplied by the conference budget to get your conference apportionments, multiplied by the district budget to get your district apportionments. And for the purposes of disaffiliation, the first part of the number is the cost structure is about the benefit liability. It's about promises made to Virginia Conference retired clergy, okay? One part of that is retiree health. That's easy. It is what it is, retiree health. The other is unfunded pension liability. That is complicated to explain, and there's a video on the conference website that John Fuller put out that gives great information. Those are great big numbers, like 37 million whatever and 43 million whatever. So the little bit of decimal is multiplied by the great big numbers to get your Part 1 benefit liability. Now, some people ask, why do we have to pay that? Well, we're a connectional church, right? We are connected. We support things all around the world and support the benefits and care and ministries, not only for our local church, but for churches in our conference and around the country and around the world. And so this is our connectional responsibility that we all have a part in. Now, I'll do my little illustration that I do. How many people here receive Social Security? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay. How many people pay into Social Security or self-employment tax? Okay. People who receive a benefit, what would happen if the people who pay in stop paying? Your benefit would go away, it'd go down, or everybody less is going to have to pay a whole lot more, right? It's kind of like that. These are promises made to our clergy, and it's our connectional responsibility. So it calculates a number for that. The next part's about 2 years of apportionments. So 2 times your 2023 apportionments, the less than you've paid. Apportionments are about people and ministries. And so those 2 things in particular are about feathering out disaffiliating churches. So it gives the annual conference a bit of a cushion, right, of money that they would have paid in that now can be a cushion, while as a whole conference we adjust to them not being part of the connectional piece. And so the third part is legal expenses. So you have to hire an attorney and set up a non-stock, nonprofit corporation to receive the property, and the conference trustees' expenses, legal fees, which is a base price of $3,000. Now, a question I often get, well, I'll head it off actually, why do we have to pay the conference legal fees? So let's say, for instance, Boonesboro decided to disaffiliate and Peakland decided to stay. Would you want your apportionments to go up to cover the legal expenses of a church that decided to leave? I don't think so. So basically, it's not fair for churches who choose to stay to have to cover the legal expenses for those who leave. So those 3 things apply to every church. The next 2 are situational, having to do with grants or loans related to property. And the last one is clergy compensation support. If it's out of sync with the conference year, we can't find another appointment for the pastor. Pastor chooses to stay, then it supports their compensation till the end of the conference year, till we find an appointment for them. So those things go together to make the disaffiliation cost. So by following the process and paying the cost, that allows a local church to leave with all of their property, real property, personal property, so all the land, building, parsonage, cemeteries, personal property like, pianos, organs, chairs, tables, all that. Tangible and intangible, all the accounts. And it's not related to the value of the property at all, okay? Now, not all annual conferences are doing that. Some are tying it, have a factor in for the cost of the value of the property, but we chose in Virginia not to do that. So they finalized the disaffiliation agreement. When it's almost done, we have a called church conference where this is the vote, all professing members who are present are eligible to vote. The church conference, all professing members can vote, but for 2553, you have to be present to be able to be eligible to vote. Sandra and I come and we preside at the meeting, and they present, the lay point person presents the disaffiliation agreement, the cost, and how you're going to pay for it. Church has to figure out how to pay for it on their own. If it's approved, then they send in a deposit and the signatures and source of funds and await the ratifying annual conference. It's been in the Book of Discipline for a long time that you can't leave the denomination without approval of annual conference. And so we have these ratifying annual conferences. Next one is May 6th, and they're virtual, where the annual conference votes to ratify the agreement. It's a straight up or down vote. You can't get in the agreement and change it, but it's a straight up or down vote. And then after that, within 90 days, they goes to settlement after the lawyers do all what lawyers do. And they have settlement. That's actually the disaffiliation date of that church. They stay United Methodist until the disaffiliation date. Once they hit the disaffiliation date, if their pastor is staying United Methodist, the pastor then is no longer the pastor of that church. They have to cease using the cross and flame and any Methodist symbols, although they can keep their hymnals, Bibles, and books of worship. So that's the process in a nutshell. Yeah. It's a big nutshell, but usually that nutshell is an hour or more long. So
now, the denomination is still under the 2019 discipline, which is the traditional understanding of sexuality. So given that, that's the law in the church, why are churches choosing to disaffiliate now when the law is mostly on their side?
That's a great question, because sometimes I get it asked a little bit differently, like, why do we have to go? But the bottom line is, it's all about church choice. I've encountered the very first one I did, this would have been back in 2019, it was around human sexuality, and they were just tired of the struggle. Some churches just, they don't trust that it won't change. Some churches, I've had some very small churches who are less vital that feel that that's what's holding them back from becoming vibrant. And it's really up to the discernment of the church. I also have churches that say, you know, right now we agree with what the discipline says and it's fine, and well, let's wait and see what happens with 2024. Or we're United Methodists, that we can be in this big tent in the middle where, you know, whether you're conservative, moderate, or progressive, we can agree that we disagree about this matter, but we agree about so much more. I often have the opportunity to explain the whole incompatible and compatibilist thing, because sometimes we get some derision about that it's punitive or that it's really making fun or offensive. And that terminology was actually coined by Tom Lambrecht from the Good News Movement, the conservative faction of the United Methodist Church for many years. And basically, there are incompatibilists on both sides. And there are conservative, progressive ones and conservative ones. And basically, an incompatibilist says, I only want to affiliate with people who think the way I do. They're incompatible with anyone who thinks differently. And the big middle, the big tent in the middle, are compatibilists. They say, I will be in relationship with people who think differently than I do on this subject. Even though we may disagree about this thing, we still, like I said, agree about so much else. And so we're compatible. We don't let this, you know, destroy the relationship. And so that's, you know, it's really a choice that local churches make.
How many churches in our district have already officially been approved by our annual conference to disaffiliate?
So all across our conference, there were 10 at the first annual conference, and of that, I think 6 were ours. And then at the second one, 34 came, and 34 came and 33 were approved. And of that, I think it was about 13 or so that were ours. We have about 21, I think, teed up for May. In our district, okay, so there were 33 that would have approved. So there's been 43 approved so far. We have 1,150 churches, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not like Texas or other places where a third of the conference is gone.
Are all of these disaffiliating churches joining the Global Methodist? Do you know?
Yeah, not in Virginia, not in Virginia. The vast majority of the churches, you know, are going independent. And same with pastors too.
Yeah.
I know that skips to another question, but now there are some that are affiliated with the Global Methodist Church, but not the majority of them. Now I've had some that say, because it's really two things in the discernment, right? Disaffiliate or not, and then what do we want to be when we disaffiliate? And those are two big questions that should be approached. And some churches are choosing to approach them sort of separately. We know, we decided, we discerned we wanted to go, but we're going to take some time and be an independent church while we discern what we want to do next. And some I think are looking into other denominations like the Wesleyan. And like I said, the process and the cost structure are the same no matter what a church decides to do.
We know that there are some conferences that do already allow clergy to preside at same-gender weddings and that will ordain LGBTQA. That hasn't been the case in Virginia with our previous bishops. Is that going to change with Bishop Sue?
Well, you know, that's a challenging question. So here's what I'll say. The Book of Discipline says what it says, whether you agree with it or not, it says what it says. And if someone violates that, and it's really, complaints can be brought against the lady too. Do you know that? Yeah, they can. And anyone can bring a complaint against anyone. And if the bishop receives a complaint, then she'll process it in a way she deems appropriate. And that's the best I can do with that question.
Is the United Methodist denomination planning on changing the Apostles' Creed, the Bible, or any of our other core beliefs? They haven't notified me.
Or me.
And if you know our denomination's history, it takes forever to make changes. It took us 2 general conferences to approve a statement on baptism, on what it is United Methodists believe about baptism and the implications. What does it mean for United Methodists to celebrate communion? That took a whole conference. To create a new order for deacon, that took years of development. We have been talking about sexuality and ordination and inclusion for 50 years. We haven't been talking about the Apostles' Creed or the Bible or any of our other core beliefs. We haven't had disagreements on those for that long. So I lack the imagination to see how the United Methodist Church would quickly change fundamental core beliefs. And some of those beliefs are baked into the sacred part of the discipline that can't be changed. I understand that can't be changed easily. There, is that better?
Yep.
Yes, okay. I understand where this question is coming from. For many traditional folks who understand marriage as a core central value, to have that changed feels like it knocks one of the pillars that hold up our faith. I get that. And so if that goes, anything's possible. I don't believe that's true. With marriage and inclusion regarding ordination, we have been in conversation for 50 years about that. That has been both within the church and in our society. These other core principles of our faith, we're not letting go of. I'm not letting go of them. And we have voice to our conference, in our church, in the denomination, to help shape our own beliefs. And so I remain confident in our United Methodist Church. Yeah. Is anything set to change at Peakland anytime soon? 2 answers to that. No, there are no pastoral changes coming down. There, okay.
You heard it here first.
Right, you heard it here first. Yeah. Nobody on our current staff has submitted plans of retirement or leaving, and so our staff remains solid. Our ministry remains solid. We talked about compatible. We disagree on some key issues here at Peakland, and yet we are faithful together. We love being together. It has been a hallmark of the United Methodist Church for as long as I've been a pastor. I love that about this denomination. People of good faith can disagree on key issues and still be in the same room together, even if they're sitting in my pew where I wanted to sit today. That won't change at Peakland. I am determined that we honor our deep felt differences and still do ministry together. It occurred to me that I should have made this a can drive, that we could have gathered together and talked and actually done some good for an organization today. Next time, you'll bring a can good. Every can you bring gives you a minute you're allowed to talk. We'll do that next time. So, now, we are also a church that will change as we emerge out of COVID. My goodness, the opportunities for ministry are abundant in this area. We have had speaker after speaker come to worship on Sunday to tell us about their helping agencies and the ways that we have helped and can help in the future. Of course we'll change. We're going to get better and stronger. We're going to keep reaching out to our community, and they will know who we are. And they will see, look at those United Methodists. Aren't they full of love for each other and our community? That's going to be an exciting change to see. I'm looking forward to that. All right, those are the questions you submitted to me ahead of time. I'm eager to hear from you about questions you do have sitting here. Anything we can clarify for you? Yes. We are recording this so that folks who couldn't be present can see this afterwards. So do state your name, if you would.
Elaine Roy, and I think there's one bit of information that has not been mentioned, and that is after the general conference vote takes place in 2024, and a church, I'm not saying Peakland, but a church that is weighted to see how that vote would turn out, decides they're not happy with that vote.
Sure.
And what happens then if they want to leave? And it's my understanding that then they have to buy their church.
Okay, good. I don't know. Denise?
Yeah. So anybody who tells you they know what's going to happen at General Conference, they don't. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I don't know. The bishops don't know. Nobody knows. General Conference will do what General Conference will do. There is a postponed General Conference, so that means it's the same delegates and the same legislations. The General Conference is the only one who can make changes, i.e. to 2553. I suppose one thing they could do is just lift that date out, but who knows? We don't know what they will do. So there is no plan that churches will have to buy their property at all. We don't know anything about that.
Yes, my name is George Dawson. Kind of a related question, and maybe the flip side is, my name is George Dawson, and I have a kind of a related question. Did I hear correctly that our conference is honoring the
53.
53 through the end of this year?
Right. That's all we can do.
And after that, we don't know.
Right. So originally, we were going to have an intermediate process when 2553 sunset on 12/31/23, which was how it was written back in 2019.
So if at annual conference, is it the restrictive language? What's the term? Yeah. If that language is upheld and there is language to enforce that strictly, and a given bishop may or may not have choice on that, then it's also true that there's the church that is progressive that wanted to leave for that reason will not necessarily have a path out that's under understood. That's also up in the air. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's up in the air. 2553, as of right this second, is available to a church whether they agree or disagree. Everything will stop at the end of 2023 because the Judicial Council ruled that 2553 was the only paragraph that could be used to disaffiliate over matters of human sexuality. No, I'm getting to what you were saying, okay? We don't know what General Conference will do, so if the language stays the same or gets even more stricter, we don't know. This is Denise talking. I have a hard time thinking in my own head that they will just shut the door, right? Because then we're plunged back in the chaos of 2016. Now, could that happen? Yes, it could. I'm not seeing where that would be healthy for the denomination. So if it gets more restrictive, then I would think that you might start to see more in Virginia, more progressive churches leave, but we don't know. It's all supposition at this point because we don't know what General Conference is going to do.
Right.
So whether you're concerned that you have feelings that are conservative in nature and want to make sure that door stays open after the end of this year, there's no guarantee. And on the flip side, if you're progressive and have strong feelings and want to make sure there's no guarantee either way. Either way,
Right.
whatever you feel,
Right.
it's open.
We have to
Yeah.
wait until General Conference acts.
And again, the General Conference will be in May 2024. So there'll be a 5-month period there when the paragraph 2053 is no longer active until General Conference 2024. All right? Good. Other questions? Yes.
I'm Peggy Nolly. My question is concerning reconciliation ministries. How does that fit in with 2553?
2553 itself, I don't know that it really speaks to that itself. However, and you've probably read somewhere, different annual conferences are putting together different strategies to help with that. And it's really depending on the context. So if you lose a third of your churches, you need a different context than if you lose 10% of your churches. And in Virginia, we are a very diverse annual conference geographically, right? Theologically. So we're not seeing as much movement in Northern Virginia and in some areas as we are in our district and a couple of others. It's a matter of generally theological demographics. So for our district, what we're looking at, we'll have some areas that will be what we call deserts. For instance, in the Dry Fork area in Patrick County, part of our district, there'll be one United Methodist Church left. And in Dry Fork, there will be none. And so that's a desert. So we're going to create some oasis opportunities for that. Also, we invite all the professing members of all churches who approve the disaffiliation, that if they choose to remain United Methodist, here's some churches you can go to. Part of that, too, will be opportunities for people to just have a resting place, too. I was thinking about that in my driving today, that if I did one of these in our district, not too far from here, and it was, in our district, most of the votes aren't even close. I mean, there's only been one that was even close to the 2/3 threshold, but this one that was, whatever the number was, 15-1. And the one lady was a trustee, and I walked by and she was talking to her fellow trustees on the way out, and she had been crying. She cried when she filled out her ballot. And she said, I don't agree with this, but I'll do it because I know you want it so badly. But she'd been there for 40 years. And so that kind of pain in trying to find where you want to fit in and to be ready to take that step again is going to take perhaps a special kind of ministry available to people who might just need a resting place.
And what if Peakland were that place? What if folks could come here and find good United Methodist preaching?
What if?
What if? And loving, friendly, welcoming folks
It's an opportunity.
with a variety of theological bases. What if we were that oasis? That's an exciting possibility. Other questions? These are good ones. Yes.
I was Just curious, how much does the loss of income from all these churches affect your effectiveness of the district and so on?
Right.
So to date, for the ones from the October annual conference and the February, the impact of conference apportionments is just a little bit over 2%. This past one in February, there were some churches of size where previously it was all smaller churches, and I think this one's teeing up to be mostly smaller churches. Now, in our district, this last round in February, the impact was more like 15%. So what we're doing is we're watching that very closely, because it would not be a good thing to pop up the apportionments on the people who lovingly were loyal to stay. So we're going to watch that very closely. Remember, we have that feathering out, that cushion, that 2 years cushion, that will help us then to be able to adjust as we go down the road.
Dick Potikin. I'm sorry if I missed the answer to this question, but are clergy being encouraged to go on and get a doctorate of divinity? What's happening there?
That's totally a matter of personal choice.
Right.
I'm 66, and I went to seminary when I was 40. And I toyed with the idea after seminary doing that. But at my particular age, the time and the amount of money it would cost is just not for me. We have a joke on the cabinet. There are 3 of us that don't have our doctorates, so we're the undoctored ones.
Right.
So it's really a matter of choice. We encourage learning and continuing education.
Sure. I asked one of my former DSs, are you all, the cabinet and the bishop, waiting for me to get my doctorate to do something with me? And he said no. So, but I take my continuing education very seriously. Right now I'm enrolled in a 3-year course of study called Creating a Culture of Renewal that helps congregations dream big, vision big. What's the scary thing that you can only do with Christ? That sort of question. And so I do take my continuing education very seriously. I have 2 teenage sons, and I need to invest dollars in their continuing education. So, if you all would like to send me to get my doctorate and pay for it and help me with the study, I will happily receive. If you want to pay for their college education so I can pay for my doctorate, I'll be happy to do that. If you want to pay off Andrew's student debt and then invest in his PhD, that's your smart money right there, people. Let me tell you.
I also, just on a note, the United Methodist Church has a lot of support to help people get their master's degrees, especially in going into ministry. When it comes to doctoral work, it is practically non-existent. Before I came to you all, I was working for a graduate admissions department at a university. And that was one of the questions we got all the time, because Doctor of Ministry programs do not offer very much scholarship at almost any of the seminaries. PhD programs, most of them do, but that's a full-time commitment, and that means 5 to 7 years of not being in ministry.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions? Young people, anything we can clarify? There's been a lot of words, and we're going to have a quiz later on over supper. So, no. Right. So, all right. There were some other questions that didn't have to do with this affiliation. The doctorate was the second one. Got a question. Why do our congregations only celebrate communion once a month? I asked Andrew to answer that briefly.
Why do you keep... Oh. Because you haven't told us you want to do it more. The history is that United Methodist churches didn't get communion all the time because only a traveling circuit rider could provide communion. And you only saw one of them every so often, sometimes once a month. Now that we have clergy who are appointed to local churches, the only reason that we don't do communion more often is congregational and pastoral preference.
Right. At the last church, we had before COVID, we had a 9:30 service and 11 service, And at the 9:30 service, we had communion each week. It was a lovely service, small in number, so it didn't take us very long, but I loved it. I loved doing weekly communion. And if that's an important question at Peakland, we can explore what that would look like here. Excellent. So, what are the statistics and trends for young people coming into professional ministry? Denise, can you give us an overview?
Yeah, I'll try my best. So pre-COVID, we I think in Virginia Conference, we're seeing an influx of younger clergy or people coming into ministry at a younger age. When I went to seminary, the average age was 37. This was in 96.
I was under that, same time.
I think with COVID, that might have slowed down a little bit. Andrew probably has a good beat on this more than I do, but it's a mix of ages.
Most of the seminaries still have I would say 30 general age from my reads. 2019 really did a lot of slowing of that number. I have a whole lot of friends who were in seminary who have gotten their degrees and walked away from the church because they didn't feel like they could support it.
Right. So yes, there are young people, but it's challenging, and it continues to be challenging. The last prepared question that you all sent to me regarding the Scouts. Our denomination and conference recommended that churches not charter, but enter into affiliation agreements or building usage agreements. Other conferences have done other things, allowed for chartering. We here at Peakland have had a scout troop for 60 years, is that right? And so our trustees decided to charter our current church, our current scouts for 1 year. That means we support them, it's very involved. We want to maintain the current relationship that we've always had with our scouts. Other conferences have made other decisions about that. Is Virginia set to change its understanding of scouting?
No, in December, we received a new affiliation agreement. That's sort of the new word from chartering. It seeks to help protect the local church and the pastors. I know all the time I was in the local church, I was the executive of the scout troop, and so we recommend that it be one of the trustees. The affiliation agreement that came to us originally, the Virginia Conference refused to go along with it unless they increased the amount, decreased the frequency necessary for background checks. We felt that was real important. And they did make that change. So in December, a new affiliation agreement, which is like what the charter would do. It just sort of changes that relationship between the national organization, the council, the troop, and the local church. Originally, the troop and the church, instead of owning the equipment and all of that, that was going to shift to the council. And some councils weren't ready to make that kind of shift, which caused some of the hiccups there. But there is, on the conference website, there's an affiliation agreement that local churches can use, or they can use a facilities use agreement like you might with the Girl Scouts. Or you can use both if you want.
Right. Good. Are there other questions? We have been very efficient with our time. This has been wonderful. I am so grateful to you all for saying we have a need for more information and for coming out here and your willingness to listen and sit through some very technical language here. It can be baffling and confusing, and I hope you will continue to reach out to us if you have questions for clarification, or I heard this, or is this true, or is this changing, so that we can continue dialogue. This is kind of wonderful. We're going to take a look at what we may need to do this again for other issues that have to do mostly with Peakland. This town hall meeting is great. Thank you all for your time. Oh, yes. Final word. Oh, sorry.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. Not a question, but I've got a couple of comments, if that's okay. Okay, I'm Paul Thompson, and I want to say that this morning at our Horizon service, 9:45 service, we did a couple of songs which really got to me and made me feel even better about Peakland. Do I need to?
There you go.
Okay. One of the songs that we did this morning was titled, I believe, Do Something. And I thought, while we were singing that song, how much Peakland does. And then there was a phrase in a song that said, if not you and me, then who?
Yes.
And I'm thinking, who is all of us right now at Peakland?
Yes.
And in my opinion, we're doing a tremendous job of doing things. The second song that got to me, and this was also led by Andrew, by the way, he did both these, talked about drawing your circle,
Draw the circle.
and then drawing your circle wider. And so I'm thinking, with all of the things that Peakland does, and has done, and will probably continue to do, with all of us doing these things, it's probable that we should be drawing our circle wider all the time, with more and more of us being involved in doing that.
Wonderful.
So thank you for the opportunity.
That's why he's our lay leader. It's Pastor Dave's birthday. And he's here at a church meeting. Birthday.
Yay.
Rise as you're able. Your pastor got you out of here in less than an hour, just like worship. Receive these words of benediction. Go forth. Make good sorts of trouble. Be loving and kind, and welcome your neighbor. Go in peace. Amen.
I guess we have to have another meeting.